Today is Palm Sunday or Passion Sunday. The one thing about it is that I don't usually have a very long homily because you have the gospel at the beginning. You have Jesus' triumphal entry from the Gospel of Matthew, and then you have the participatory gospel, which is very long. And so, given that, I usually don't come up with too much of a homily. But I just wanted to think about, what is it that made the people go from being so supportive, being so enamored with Jesus, throwing the palm branches on the ground to crucify him within a period of a few short days? What was it that made them do that? And I think one of the things that's been interesting to me during this Lenten season is in looking at the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John, it's always like Jesus is certainly willing to say the hard things. Jesus is willing to do what he needs to do. He's not going to be pleasing to the crowd just because there's a large crowd there following him. And so what is it that caused them to change? Was it the fact that the expectations were set high after curing Lazarus and having Lazarus be raised from the dead after 4 days? Was the expectations great that something great and wonderful and magnificent was going to happen? And yet here is the Lord Jesus just kind of there preaching and teaching in the temple, and they're thinking, wait a minute, he's got to call the people to fight the Romans. He has all the people here because of the Passover. What's he doing just sitting there teaching and preaching in the temple? Call the people. It was there, that kind of a expectation becomes expectation that's unfulfilled, becomes anger, and becomes willing to even to crucify him. Or was it something that he said? Because certainly in the Gospel of John, we have instances where the crowd is very supportive initially of what Jesus is saying and doing. We think about John chapter 6. He's fed them. He's given them food. They're pretty supportive, and yet he says, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. And the people are like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we're looking for, and they begin to walk away. Or in John chapter 8, where the crowd is very supportive, and he says that the Son of Man will set you free, you will be truly free. And they're like, well, wait a minute, time out. We're sons and daughters of Abraham. We've never been enslaved by anyone. Who are you to say, that you're going to set us free? Is it something that he said? Is it something that was an expectation that he would do something and didn't do it? What was it that caused the people to go from being enamored, very supportive, to willing to crucify him? So just thinking about that, just some thoughts about that during this season, this last week of the Lenten season. It's a good thing to kind of think about that and think about human nature in general, that human nature is able to flip on a dime. So in the Gospel of Luke, you have Luke who's kind of enamored by the fact that the crowds were listening and they were hanging on to every word. But I think John would say, so what? John is really understanding of human nature and the fickleness of human nature that can be supportive at one moment and yet willing to go against the person at the next. Thanks, and God bless.